Discover how worry exposed 5 hidden truths that transform your life forever. An inspiring journey. Emily stared blankly at the library's worn carpet as her mind raced. The weight of her responsibilities sunk deeper with every passing second. Bills piled on the kitchen counter at home, each one another reminder of how her simple life had begun to feel so heavy. Longing to write, to create, she often thought back to her father, who had instilled values of hard work and honesty within her. Each day his legacy turned into a whisper of inadequacy, as colleagues feigned interest in her dusty book recommendations while secretly judging her abilities. She felt like a ghost floating within 4 walls, her potential slipping away like sand through her fingers. The aroma of coffee filled the air, pulling her from her dark thoughts. That morning she had spilled a cup all over the desk, the hot liquid soaking the edge of a manuscript she'd neglected to submit. Felt like an omen. Was it a wake-up call or an indication of her chaotic life? A sudden spark ignited within. What if those pages contained stories waiting to be unleashed? But as quickly as hope flickered, doubt rushed in. Who was she to think she could write? Without accolades or recognition, the notion felt like a comfortable prison. As days turned into weeks, Emily turned her solitude into creativity, crafting tales wrapped in lessons about kindness and resilience while her husband Tom worked tirelessly at the local factory, his steady presence a fortress amidst her chaos. Yet with every finished story, a nagging fear gnawed at her, reminding her that she was merely a librarian in the eyes of her peers, not a true author. Still, encouragement bloomed from Mrs. Jenkins, her wise mentor, pushing her forward with praise more valuable than gold. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each story read aloud in the library, laughter bubbled through the stacks, bridging connections with the children that felt like drops of sunlight. Recognition from the community followed, a glimmer of accomplishment emerging. But just as quickly as her dreams soared, shadows lengthened. A fellow librarian, propelled by envy, began undermining her. Whispers of idea theft spread like wildfire through the library floors, paralyzing her with disbelief and anger. Stunned at the betrayal, Emily felt trapped in emotional quicksand. Should she stand tall in her truth, or would retaliation darken her soul? The room began to fade into silence, her heart racing with a cocktail of desperation and determination. This was the moment of reckoning, to reclaim her narrative or to let it slip from her grasp. The air crackled with unresolved tension as her chest tightened around the idea of confronting ambition's thorns. Here she stood at the precipice of something grand, yet wrapped in a web of uncertainty. Would she find the strength to weave her voice through the inhospitable threads woven by those who should have shared in her triumph? As she opened her mouth to speak, hesitation swirled inside her like a tempest, the audience awaiting the revelation of her story. Emily felt the weight of the moment press against her chest like an immovable boulder. Silence enveloped her, the expectant gazes of her peers igniting a flicker of resolve. She inhaled sharply, steadying herself as she thought of the stories she had crafted, the children who had laughed and imagined alongside her. Those moments were worth fighting for. The truth shone bright and clear within her. Creation was a daring act of courage, and she was determined to own it. Gathering her composure, she chose to transform the betrayal into an opportunity. I understand that some of you have concerns, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. But I promise you, these stories come from my heart and mind, shaped by my experiences. The words flowed out with a newfound authority. Her narrative was not solely hers. It belonged to her father, to the children who found joy in her tales, to every moment she had poured into her craft. Their faces shifted from suspicion to curiosity, and for the first time, Emily felt the invisible walls she had built around her passion begin to crumble. Instead of wallowing in fear, she leaned into her vulnerability, revealing every thread of anxiety she had woven into her stories. I write because it's how I connect to the world, she continued. It's my way of fighting against the shadows. The murmurs in the room began to transform. Discomfort shifted into understanding, and a frisson of admiration rippled through the audience. Emily realized her position had shifted too. She wasn't just the librarian sitting quietly in the corner. Anymore she was a voice, a creator, and a storyteller fighting for her place. Exposure was terrifying, yet strangely liberating. Armed with honesty, she found her footing in the conversation, her stance unwavering against the murmurs of discontent. She soon devised a plan she would rally support from those who truly valued her stories, rather than essay the defeat from malicious gossip. This moment etched in time sparked a fire within her as she shared her vision. Something beyond her initial fears began to crystallize. A community centered around creativity and understanding. She would organize an open mic event at the library, inviting children and adults alike to share their voices, to embrace creativity in all its forms. Through collaboration, she could weave her narrative stronger and prevent silencing by the discontented. Once the presentation concluded, Emily stepped down from her initial platform feeling lighter. Shadows still lurked, but she was no longer gripped by them. Rather, they became catalysts propelling her forward. Her colleagues' opinions mattered less as the relationship she cultivated with her community blossomed. That evening at home with Tom, the triumph continued to swell within her. As they discussed potential themes and choosing inviting decor for the event, she felt invigorated. This was just the beginning. Tom finalized his support, encouraging Emily to put her ideas into action without fear of scrutiny. However, as bedtime approached, doubt tugged at her again. What if she faced further sabotage? What if her efforts fell flat? The familiar grip of worry tightened, but Emily now welcomed it differently. It was just another layer in her journey, a reminder that growth would often blend with uncertainty. She decided silently then, and there a chorus of motivations igniting within her to embrace both fear and excitement. Tomorrow she would revisit the stories hidden in her aura, extract more from them, and thrust them onto the stage beside her. She would stand firm in her authenticity no matter what the world threw at her. The moment dawned before her. The open mic awaited her. She would finally face the echoes of doubt. How far could she reach beyond what was expected of her? And could she reclaim her identity as a storyteller among storytellers? With a pounding heart, she held on to her resolve. Ready for whatever the next chapter would demand of her, her dreams lingered just at the edge of realization. A single breath hung in the air, shaping the next steps. Before her stood not merely an event, but an awakening. It was time to confront those who had scrutinized her. The thought lingered tantalizingly. How would she seize this opportunity to reshape her story? Emily awoke the next morning enveloped in a blend of anticipation and trepidation. It was as if the air around her buzzed with the energy of a day that promised transformation. She lay still for a moment, abandoned by sleep but unwilling to leave the comfort of her bed. Would the open mic truly become a platform for her voice? Or would it serve as a stage for her fears and insecurities? After a quick breakfast and exchanging playful jibes with Tom, she retreated to her writing nook, the small corner of the living room where stories flowed like water from a tap. As she reviewed her notes, her heart raced. The stories she planned to share resonated deeply with her journey, each punctuated with lessons learned, disappointments faced, and ultimately courage reclaimed. She was struck by a realization. Her stories were not just woven from her experiences. They were reminders of resilience, lessons etched through the fabric of her being. Time felt transitory as she rehearsed. Each word had its weight. She realized that every pause and inflection conveyed not merely the story itself, but the intricate layers of her vulnerability. It was an examination of her own potential, and with every recitation, it dawned on her that she was ready to face the reception her words would receive. She arrived at the library earlier than planned, the familiar scent of books and faint coffee wafting through the air creating an oddly comforting ambience. Emily felt the nervous energy among the few attendees trickling in her audience. Yet rather than succumbing to her jitters, she seized the moment. What am I afraid of? She asked herself. It was her moment to embrace the truth that lingered beneath her worries. The room filled, and soon, she found herself standing before a crowd whose faces mirrored the same blend of curiosity and anticipation she felt. Each person, she reminded herself, was a potential ally rather than a critic. They were commanders of their own narratives, seeking connection through shared experiences. It was no longer about risking exposure. It was about celebrating collective story. As she began to speak, the walls of her doubt softened. She recounted her contributions, her struggles with creativity, and the space she had carved in a world that too often stifled her voice. Each story became a thread, weaving through the air like an intricate tapestry. The engagement from her audience fueled her, igniting a frail but fierce fire within her soul. Midway through her sharing, she noticed a figure in the back, one of her most vocal skeptics during her presentation. Fear and defiance coalesced within her. This was a pivotal moment. Rather than allowing anxiety to overtake her again, Emily aimed her focus on this person. "You may not believe in my stories," she declared, locking eyes with them, "but these tales carry weight beyond what you perceive. They represent hope, laughter, and the potential to rise above shadows." The response was visceral. Gasps of surprise rippled, and a shift in energy swept through the room. It was as if she had pulled a pin from a grenade of anticipation, and now her words were splattered against the walls, brave, unfiltered, unafraid of judgment. Yet as she stepped down from the podium, exhilaration surged within her, but beneath it was an unsettling ripple, a question formulating in her mind. Would the spark of acceptance she felt sustain, or would the shadows re-emerge? With her heart still racing, she mingled among the audience, receiving words of encouragement and praise that bolstered her resolve. Yet the familiar figure loomed, casting doubt in her mind. She needed clarity, a decisive moment that would shape her next steps. Was she merely riding high on a wave of fleeting applause, or had she truly unlocked a new level of authenticity? The day had unfolded a layer of power she never knew existed, yet she still faced the nagging reality. The journey was far from finished, and her past fears were not entirely vanquished. The air thickened with unresolved potential as Emily contemplated her next move. Would she challenge the doubts that still lurked around the edges? Would she confront those uncertainties and harness them to carve a new path forward? Those questions pulsated in the back of her mind, begging for resolution. With every heartbeat, she felt the rising anticipation of a new chapter, brimming with uncertainty, yet alive with possibility. The day's echoes revealed one crucial insight. The real challenge was not just in sharing her stories, but in owning them fearlessly and unapologetically. As she traced her steps back homeward, driven by excitement and trepidation, she sensed something monumental was on the horizon. Each moment she had lived, she realized, was simply a prelude to the real confrontation ahead. How would she face the voices that once sought to diminish her? And would she fully embrace her evolution as a storyteller, unraveling a much larger narrative? Emily stepped into her apartment, the haunting echoes of applause still reverberating in her mind. The thrill of sharing her stories had ignited a spark, yet she couldn't shake the dissonance brewing within her. All those supportive words gradually blended into a murmur overshadowed by a singular, unsparing voice, her own self-doubt. As she sank onto the couch, her thoughts spiraled into a labyrinth of what-ifs and can I release? The notebook lay open on the coffee table, its pages filled with ideas and reflections that had once danced in her mind like flames. Now they felt more like shackles. Gritting her teeth, she picked up her pen, determined to write through the unease. Each stroke was an act of reclamation. She sought to outline her journey not as a series of past failures, but as potential unlocked. 5 truths, she mused, the idea surfacing like a buoy amidst turbulent waters. What had she learned from her experiences? The first truth was evident. Vulnerability was not a weakness but a bridge that connected her with others. Every person present that day had responded not to a polished performance but to a genuine sharing of humanity. The second truth began to emerge as she remembered the skeptical figure in the back of the room. Confronting that individual had felt liberating, yet now it morphed into something complex, an opportunity for deeper introspection. Was she willing to engage in dialogues that challenged her? To address resistance head-on instead of retreating into shadows? Suddenly, the weight of truth 3 settled like an anchor in her mind. Acceptance wasn't just external, bestowed by others. It had to be an internal battle won first. Emily realized it was the approval she sought from herself that would ultimately matter. Riding this wave of reflection, she explored the fourth truth with renewed fervor. Creativity wasn't his singular outlet, confined to the open mic or her writing nook. It was a fluid motion, an approach to life that could be expressed through conversations, choices, and actions. It was about infusing her existence with meaning through every interaction, a stance that made her feel alive and connected, regardless of the applause. The fifth truth unfurled as a potent revelation. Her journey was ever evolving. Each moment she hesitated to write, speak, or act was an opportunity to embrace discomfort and turn it into growth. The shadows of past fears could either be a dampening force or a catalyst for exploration. So far she had opted the former, but was it too late to shift? With each truth she penned, Emily felt a rush of empowerment rewriting her narrative. It was up to her to define herself, to become the storyteller of her own life, not merely the protagonist responding to others. As dusk cast its warm glow through the window, illuminating her scribbles, a firm decision took root. She would seek out that critic, engage with them not in conflict but in inquiry. What perspectives would they offer? Could she dismantle their skepticism and perhaps, together, discover truths neither had anticipated? Tomorrow would see her stepping into the unknown once more, not with apprehension, but with the buoyancy of someone who understands growth is woven through challenge. Would she dare open the dialogue she craved and face the potential skepticism? Or would she settle back into her comfort zone, letting fear dictate her path? The weight of her next move loomed large, promising new insights and unforeseen challenges. Each moment didn't just hold answers, they wrapped around questions yet to be posed, igniting a pulse of curiosity. With everything on the line, Emily's heart raced anew, preparing to confront not just others but the vast landscape of her own fears. What awaited her when she finally reached for the truth beyond her comfort zone? As morning light slanted through her apartment window, painting the walls with golden hues, Emily felt the weight of her choices bear down on her. The echoes from last night lingered, a blend of applause and self-questioning. Today, the encounter with the critic loomed ahead as both an opportunity and a source of trepidation. Emily prepared a simple breakfast, but every action felt ritualistic, filled with a quiet determination. What would she say? How could she present her questions without appearing fragile or defensive? A hum of anxiety thrummed beneath her calm facade as she replayed scenarios in her mind. She chewed deliberately, reminding herself of the truth she had penned. Vulnerability was her strength. This was her bridge to not only connect with the critic, but also to her own authentic self. She shifted her focus, aware that this dialogue was about unraveling a richer understanding, not merely justifying her decisions. With her heart drumming a steady beat, Emily glanced at her notebook again. New words, tinged with clarity, cried out for manifestation. She scribbled down specific questions aimed at discovering the logic behind the criticism. Why that comment on her depth? What did they perceive that she hadn't grasped? Each question felt like an admission of her own exploratory growth, an acceptance that learning could arise from discomfort. After gathering her resolve, she pulled on a light jacket. The air outside was crisp, invigorating. As she navigated the city streets, the familiar hum of morning activity surrounded her, pushing her forward. She entered the cafe where they had agreed to meet, her pulse quickening at the threshold. Scanning the room, she caught sight of him, Greg, a figure she'd known from the writing community. He appeared imposing at first, seated with a coffee mug cradled in his hands, a frown deepening the lines of his brow as he focused on something in front of him. Yet, beneath that exterior, she sensed the layers of his own struggles, mirroring her own. Emily, he greeted, eyebrows raised in surprise. You came. I did, she replied, forcing a smile, the warmth in her voice a beacon against the tension. I wanted to hear you out. The conversation began tentatively, each of them navigating the fragile territory of critique and understanding. At first, it oscillated between awkward pleasantries and challenging observations. Greg launched into his thoughts on her work. His criticisms were sharper than she'd expected. They cut through her carefully constructed armor, but she felt a slow, simmering clarity respond in kind. Your stories lack the rawness they seem to strive for, he said, watching her closely. They feel polished but not real. His words struck a chord, an unexpected depth of revelation. Yet instead of retreating, Emily pressed on. What does it mean to be raw? Can you explain that? She inquired, her voice steady, defying the tempest within. And there it was, a turning point. The initial defensiveness dulled, replaced by probing curiosity. In their exchange, Emily discovered parts of herself she hadn't acknowledged. Greg detailed how authenticity in storytelling could lay bare emotions and experiences in a manner that transcended artistry alone. As she absorbed his insights, a realization struck. For the first time, her voice did not falter under judgment. She was engaging, not just defending. The weight of self-doubt began to lift, turning into a pursuit of growth she hadn't anticipated. In asking questions, she unveiled more about herself than in any solitary writing session. Time blurred in their transformative dialogue, each response layering her understanding of vulnerability. She left the cafe, armed not just with clarity on her work, but also an enhanced perception of the art of communication itself. Walking away, Emily realized that the experience had redefined the relationship she had with both her fears and her aspirations. Challenges were indeed pathways, and this meeting had offered much more than anticipated, an unexpected shift in the narrative of her journey. But in the back of her mind, a thought emerged like a specter from the shadows. Could this newfound understanding seep into her writing? What obstacles would she confront next, now that she had tasted the richness of authentic exchanges? As she strolled through the vibrant streets, Emily felt the pulse of the city harmonize with her renewed conviction. Change had burgeoned within her, awakening the often overlooked potential that lay just beneath the surface. But answers often lead to more questions, and with each step she wondered, how would she harness this momentum, and at what cost? Emily awoke the following morning with a renewed sense of purpose swirling inside her. Last night's conversation with Greg remained vivid, illuminating corners of her psyche she hadn't dared to explore. With every sip of her coffee, she could still hear his voice saying, "Authenticity transcends polish." The words hung in her mind like a guiding mantra, nudging her toward a new chapter of her writing journey. Today felt pivotal, and Emily yearned to seize this moment. After breakfast, she plopped onto her couch, the cushions embodying the comfort of familiarity, yet she sensed discomfort lurking beneath. This was the perfect metaphor for her writing safe, yet yearning for authenticity. The screen of her laptop flickered to life as she tried to summon the courage to write something raw, fingers poised over the keys. She hesitated, grappling with the familiar tightness in her chest. Could she expose herself? Greg hadn't just critiqued her stories. He had unearthed layers of her own fears and doubts. Writing had always been her refuge, a place where she could create fantastical worlds without judgment. Now it felt like a daunting stage, her heart racing in anticipation of an audience that could turn critical at any moment. She forced herself to take a deep breath and wrote the first line, a reflection of her internal battlefield. The stories we tell ourselves can be our greatest prison. Each letter felt like a small rebellion, a whisper of defiance against her tendencies to bury emotions beneath layers of artifice. As she continued, she began to question more than just the narrative. Who was she really behind this polished persona? Hours slipped by unnoticed. The words poured forth, raw and unrefined, a cascade of thoughts molded into characters that mirrored her struggles. Her protagonist wrestled with vulnerability in a world that demanded strength. They were both unearthing old wounds and forging resilience. In the act of creation, Emily felt the release of pent-up fears, but also a hint of apprehension. Would she dare to show this version of herself to the world? The act of writing had transformed from a mere task into a cathartic process. She paused, staring at her screen, each word revealing a hidden truth. She was uncomfortable with vulnerability, yet she craved authenticity. Could these new stories be the bridge to connect with readers on a deeper level? But the nagging whisper of self-doubt crept in again. What did it mean to share her story? Would people relate or recoil? In confronting these questions, she found an unexpected ally within herself. This inner dialogue surged with determination. It's no longer just about literary success. It's about sincerity in the creative process. Finally, with renewed conviction, Emily dedicated the next part of her writing session to exploring themes of connection and resilience. What if she infused threads of her interactions with Greg into her narrative? Taking an honest look at her artistic journey, she could reveal how the fears of rejection had always loomed large, yet they had held the key to her breakthrough. As dusk rolled in, her apartment glowed with the warm light of the setting sun, infusing her space with a golden hue reminiscent of the morning light that had once seemed so distant. Wrapped in her blanket, she reflected on the day and the emotions she had summoned through her writing. The echoes of last night's revelation reverberated within her, a potent reminder that real change required continual engagement with discomfort. But there was something still lingering, a fragment of hesitation tinting her thoughts. Although she was finding her voice, the looming uncertainty about sharing her work remained a crossroads. Would she take the leap and reveal her inner self to the outside world? Or would the fear of vulnerability hold her back? A final spark illuminated her resolve. The journey was only beginning, and this path demanded both courage and tenacity. The stakes were high, but so too were the potential rewards. With the ink barely dried on her manuscript, a new question emerged: what consequences awaited her if she flung open the doors to her soul and invited others in? Emily woke the next morning with an unmistakable urgency. The cool morning air filled her apartment, softening the edges of her anxieties. Thoughts danced in her mind, swirling around a singular question. How much of herself was she willing to share? The sunlight streamed in, illuminating the not-so-crowded corners of her living room, a reminder of the authenticity she aimed to embrace as she scrolled through social media. It struck her just how curated everyone else's lives appeared. Perfectly edited snapshots of joy contrasted starkly with the struggles she had laid bare in her writing the evening before. Did this polished facade inhibit true connection? Her heart raced, a mix of defiance and despair. The facade was comforting yet suffocating, much like her previous writing, prettily packaged, but ultimately shallow. Diving back into her manuscript, she felt her heart engaged in a tug-of-war. Should she maintain the barriers of selective vulnerability, or tear them down and risk exposing her raw emotions? With each keystroke, she conceptualized her protagonist grappling with these very questions. It was empowering but daunting, life imitating art, as she penned scenes where characters faced their fears head-on. To immerse herself further, Emily decided to confront her self-doubt that morning. After a quick shower, she donned a comfortable outfit, ready to meet her realities. Deciding that a change of scenery might ignite inspiration, she ventured out to her favorite cafe. The aroma of fresh coffee wrapped around her as she claimed a corner seat, breathing in the energy of the bustling patrons. With a sip of her latte, she felt a surge of determination. Here she could draft scenes, capturing the essence of human connection just beyond her own insecurities. As the cafe filled, Emily observed the lives unfolding around her, the laughter, the tears, the simple conversations that painted a broader tapestry of existence. These moments stirred something deep within her. Wasn't that it? People didn't perceive beauty in perfection, but in the undulating narratives of authenticity. She opened her laptop, fingers dancing over the keys as she typed furiously. Through her characters she began to navigate complex themes like acceptance, failure, and the inherent messiness of life. Emily discovered she could imbue each page with snippets of her interactions with Greg, the moments of doubt warming her resolve. She questioned what it meant to live genuinely, not just for an audience but for herself. Yet as the words flowed, an insidious thought crept in: what if she exposed her deepest truths only to be dismissed? This fear gripped her like an icy hand. Beneath that fear lay a golden opportunity. What if her vulnerability indeed resonated with someone who felt unseen? As lunch turned into afternoon, Emily lost track of time. The writing transformed from a task to a revelation. She started noticing patterns in her narratives, unearthing themes she had previously overlooked. What she had once considered weaknesses began to morph into strengths. The internal struggle mirrored her characters' journeys, a shared humanity inviting connection. Emily knew she needed feedback. She remembered the writing group she'd explored prior, its supportive members a potential lifeline. Taking a deep breath, she resolved to face her fears. She would share her work, open her heart, and invite judgment. Would this act of exposure open the floodgates to authenticity she'd been thirsting for? As the afternoon sun sank, she packed her things, determination carrying her through the doorway. Outside, the air felt electric with potential. A new thought nudged against the edge of her mind. Might this leap ignite a transformation she never thought possible? Taking one step after another, she envisioned the moment she would lay bare her writing before others. It ignited an unforeseen nostalgia. After all, she had sought connection her entire life, hadn't she? Just as she pondered the implications of this impending exposure, an unexpected sensation curled inside her, a mix of fear and exhilarating thrill. Could this journey fracture her limits and redefine her reality? The choice loomed, heavy with anticipation. With her finger hovering over the keyboard, her next chapter awaited. Would today mark the first step toward vulnerability, or would she cower back into the shadows of safety? Emily stood at the threshold of her apartment, the door facing the chaos of the wider world, her heart racing in sync with her thoughts. What if she stepped into that unknown without the armor she typically wore? Each breath felt like a decision, a step towards something inevitable and transformative. The sunlight batting against her windows was an invitation, beckoning her out into a reality that could mirror her imagination. She had felt the burden of inadequacy, but this wasn't just about writing anymore. It seemed to have become a quest for authenticity, for a voice unfiltered and true. Setting out, she imagined the supportive community that awaited her at the writing group, a group that had the potential to either uplift or dismantle her fragile confidence. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere promised comfort, but the trepidation simmered just beneath the surface. After ordering her usual, she settled into the corner, the small table soon cluttered with the remnants of her preparation notes, her laptop, and the delicate packet of vulnerability she planned to unwrap. As familiar faces filled the space, Emily's heart raced. Would they see her like she had yearned to be seen? Or would they gaze through her and dismiss what she had to offer? She pulled out her manuscript, the pages crisp with the weight of her exposed emotions, and attempted to steady herself against a tide of doubt overwhelming her thoughts. With a deep breath, she scanned the room. The boisterous chatter around her faded, replaced by the pounding of her heart. This was it. She needed to embody her character's courage. The protagonist she had so effortlessly crafted was ready to take a leap into the abyss of vulnerability. Slowly, she began typing again, as if reaching for a lifeline. Each word was a step toward self-acceptance, crafting a narrative that validated not only her struggles, but also the beauty found in imperfection. "Hey Emily." Greg's familiar voice broke through her concentration, jolting her back to reality. He slid into the seat across from her, a smile lighting up his face. The warmth in his gaze stirred something deeper within her. A flicker of encouragement welled up amid the uncertainty. They caught up for a moment, but she noticed the way he hesitated, a slight curiosity behind his eyes. "What are you working on?" he asked, genuinely interested. Emily felt a surge of uncertainty followed swiftly by determination. "It's my manuscript. I think it's time I share it with the group." Really share," she admitted, feeling the words leap from her mouth before she could fully grasp their implications. His smile faded slightly, replaced by thoughtful consideration. "That's a big step, Em. Are you ready for the feedback?" She hesitated, the internal conflict immediately resurfacing. Would she really be able to weather true critique of her vulnerabilities? Yet as she locked eyes with Greg, the thought of holding back felt even more unbearable. "Ready or not," she replied firmly. "I think it's time I stop hiding behind my words." As the session began, her heartbeat echoed in her ears. One by one, members of the group offered their insights, critiquing not just the story but the very essence of what she had bared. Each comment met with a rush of adrenaline. The vulnerability was potent, raw, and as insightful as the critiques themselves. Suddenly, an unexpected revelation struck her. With every piece of feedback, her fears transformed into insights. The consistency of her struggles mirrored those of her peers, each of them wrestling with their narratives, their truths. The weight of her insecurities began to lighten as acceptance seeped into her understanding. She was not alone when it was finally Emily's turn to read an excerpt. She fought through a quake of nerves, words laced with the tremors of her authentic self. With each phrase she spoke, she grasped the profound connection that simmered in the air. The vulnerability she had once deemed a burden began to feel like a crucial thread weaving her into the fabric of the group. As she closed her laptop, palpable sense of airiness enveloped her. She had landed in a space where her creativity could thrive through connection. Yet another tremor coursed through her, a whisper of fear poised on the edges of her newfound clarity. How would she handle the lingering doubts once the moment of exhilaration faded? She had crossed a threshold, but the path ahead remained buried in uncertainty, shrouded by all she threatened to uncover. What if opening up had unlocked a deeper torrent of emotions she wasn't yet prepared to explore? A challenge awaited her. The true nature of her journey had only just begun. Emily had barely settled into the comfort of her own thoughts when the tide of uncertainty washed over her again. The exhilarating feedback had sparked something, but now doubt clawed at her subconscious. What had she really unveiled? While her peers nodded thoughtfully and offered encouraging words, she could feel a dissonance deep inside, one that reverberated each time she replayed her reading in her mind. Over the next few days, she found herself mired in self-reflection. Doubts crept in like shadows, dimming the vibrant hues of her newfound courage. Each time she sat down to work, a wall of resistance formed in her mind. Was her narrative truly meaningful, or merely the projection of her fears and fantasies? The idea of returning to the cafe, of facing the group again, sent her spiraling into introspection. One evening as she stood in front of the mirror, Emily admired the reflection staring back. Yet a part of her cringed. Who was she if not the version of herself she had crafted through fiction? She clenched her fists, willing herself to grasp something more stable, more real. The reflection seemed to ask her what would happen if she let go of those fantasies. Motivated by a sense of urgency, Emily decided to confront her insecurities head-on. She drafted a list of 5 truths she needed to explore, which she believed were obscured beneath her fear. One by one, these truths emerged, each demanding to be examined. The first truth had nagged at her since childhood. Vulnerability was not weakness. She had always viewed it as an invitation for ridicule, but perhaps this understanding needed to shift. The moment she expressed her authentic self, raw and unfiltered, had revealed an unexpected connection with others. This truth screamed for recognition. Amidst the crowd, she recognized what her vulnerability had created: a community of shared experiences. The second truth challenged her narrative of inadequacy. Her story had merit. With every critique, she discovered the richness in her perspective, how every flaw woven into her narrative also represented potential. Perhaps her story wasn't about being perfect, but about sharing the journey of being real. Each chapter was a testament to resilience, woven from the tapestry of imperfection. The third truth spoke to her worthiness. She deserved her voice. It was a radical declaration, one that fueled her confidence to write her truth without donning a mask. This realization was liberating. No longer would she seek validation from others. Her value rooted itself firmly within her own narrative. The fourth truth was a daunting confrontation of her past. Some of her innermost fears were reflections of external judgments. Emily recognized how moments of hesitation stemmed from the whispers of others' critics from her past looming larger than life. They no longer held the power to determine her outcome if she focused on authenticity. Finally, the fifth truth brushed against encouragement from unlikely places. Feedback was a mirror, not a hammer. Each suggestion and critique presented an opportunity for growth. She decided to view criticism as a necessary tool, a pathway leading her closer to her potential. With renewed determination, Emily took stock of her notes and returned to her laptop. She meticulously wove her truths into the fabric of her writing, enhancing the authenticity with which she approached her characters. Each keystroke became almost ritualistic, an exploration of self liberated from the weight of expectation. She prepared for the next group meeting. Emily felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. How would her peers respond to this new version of her narrative, one so intricately tied to her newfound revelations? Breath held, she stood at the edge of another reveal, not just of her words, but of the hidden depths waiting to emerge. Would the group embrace her transformation, or would they challenge her growth in ways she had yet to fathom? A rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins. The time had come to face the deeper torrent of emotions within. Would she sink or swim in the uncharted waters of personal truth? Emily entered the cafe with an invigorated spirit, the echoes of her past doubts behind her. Today marked the culmination of her journey. A true act of courage awaited her. With the notes she had shaped into steadfast truths cradled in her hands, she was no longer the hesitant storyteller hiding behind a polished facade. The weight of 1,000 what-ifs no longer crushed her. Instead, she felt a lightness buoying her confidence as she settled into her familiar corner seat. She surveyed the gathering group of writers, kindred spirits, each with their own narratives. Today, she would lay bare her heart and embrace the rawness Greg had encouraged her to explore. Although the trembling within her echoed the flicker of uncertainty, she had transformed fear into power by confronting her vulnerabilities. No longer did she seek validation solely from her peers. Her voice had become her own, woven with strength and authenticity. When she finally shared her story, it went beyond the narrative she had crafted on the page. It was a heartfelt exposition of her evolution as a writer and a person, complete with the lessons from each truth she had unearthed. Each word she spoke painted a vivid backdrop to the laughter, the sadness, and even the chaos of her creative journey. They listened intently, unflinching in their support, allowing her to weave her truth into theirs. Applause enveloped her like a warm embrace as she concluded her reading, a sound tinged with recognition and respect. For the first time, Emily perceived the genuine connection she had fostered. She was no longer just the librarian or the struggling author. She was a vital part of this creative community. With each heartfelt evaluation and response, her confidence blossomed. Greg's earlier counsel echoed in her mind, reminding her that vulnerability is a bridge to connection. As they shared their reflections, she noticed how their own struggles mirrored hers, each one revealing an unspoken bond of authenticity. In that moment, it became clear. She had stepped out from the shadows of self-doubt and grasped her truth as a storyteller. The accolades felt less like a validation of her worth, and more like a shared celebration of their collective narratives. Each smile directed at her, each word of encouragement, solidified her newfound identity. She had become a recognized member of the storytelling realm. Realization dawned as she gathered her belongings after the meeting. She had achieved something monumental. She had confronted criticism, dismantled her insecurities, embraced her vulnerabilities, and culminated her artistic evolution in front of a community that cherished her. Fulfilling her father's legacy through storytelling was no longer just an aspiration. It was a fulfilling reality she had created. It marked the beginning of a continuous journey, each step taken with intention and strength. The depths of her emotions allowed her to thrive not just as a writer, but as a human. The ghosts of her earlier fears were not gone. They had transformed into motivators, reminding her that every struggle presented an opportunity for growth. She had emerged with renewed purpose, her place established firmly in the space she had once longed to inhabit. As she walked home, the familiar streets felt vibrantly alive, reflecting the profound growth she had achieved. Her heart settled into a steady rhythm, a perfect testament to the triumph over the narratives that once weighed her down. Emily was ready to explore new stories waiting to be told, narratives that would dance on the canvas of her creativity, each imbued with authenticity and courage. This was her moment of truth, an awakening not just as a storyteller, but as a person dedicated to her craft and her voice. She felt fulfilled and prepared to take on any challenge life threw her way. Today had signified victory not merely in the applause heard in the cafe, but in the unwavering confidence rooted deep within herself. It was time to embrace the future, offering her words to the world without fear of judgment. She was Emily, storyteller, creator, and now, an authentic voice fiercely proud of the journey ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and don't wait even one more second to share. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need the inspiration. Let us embrace our own stories together.